You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to Digging Up Ancient Aliens. This is the podcast where we examine alternative history and ancient alien narratives in the popular media. Do these ideas hold water to an archaeologist, or are there better explanations out there? We are now on episode 75, and I am Fredrik, your guide into the world of pseudo-archaeology. This time, we are asking if the Vikings could have been aliens, or maybe at least influenced by them. With me, I have Norwegian archaeologist Steffen Bakk, who runs a very successful TikTok account where he talks about Vikings, 3D printings, and, well, other things related to archaeology. And together we will ask the hard questions: if Odin's ravens might have been spy drones, if Thor's belt could have been an exosuit, and if the dwarves in Norse mythology just were grey aliens. And I want to thank everyone who supports the show. You are really helping out with producing this content, and I'm very humbled and grateful for your support. And if you want to help out, I will tell you exactly how to do that and how to get some bonus stuff at the end of this episode. Now, remember that you can find sources and further reading suggestions at our website, diggingupancientaliens.com, and there you will also find contact info if you notice any mistakes or have any suggestions. And if you like the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you left one of those fancy 5-star reviews that I heard so much about. Now, I think we have finished with our preparations, so let's dig into the episode. Fellow archaeology lovers, science nerd and history enthusiast, have you ever dreamt of showcasing your passion for our history and science? Dig no further. Welcome to the official merchandise store for your favorite podcast, Digging Up Ancient Aliens. Embark on a journey through time with our exclusive collection. Wrap yourself in the mysteries of the past with our range of themed shirts, mugs, and apparel. Each piece tells a story about your passions and podcast preference. And for the devoted archaeology aficionados, unveil our latest treasure, the Archaeology Mafia t-shirt. It is more than just apparel. It's a statement, a tribute to those who dig deeper, question the unknown, and unravel the secrets of our ancestors. These are not just merchandise. They are future relics from a time yet to be fully understood. Symbols of your dedication to unveiling the truth behind ancient aliens and the real wonders of our past. Join the crew of Digging Up Ancient Aliens, wear your curiosity, flaunt your knowledge, and join the Archaeology Mafia. Visit our store now and you will get an offer you can't refuse. Let's keep the spirit of exploration alive. Log on to diggingupancientaliens.com/store and grab your piece of history. Remember, the past is always present. So I want to welcome my guest and maybe first-time podcast guest even, Steffen Bakk. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's got to be a pleasure, and I can't wait. I've heard many good things about the Ancient Aliens show, so it's going to be interesting to be able to talk about it.
There's a lot of interesting conversation I think we will have, but for those who aren't familiar with your work or who you are, would you maybe give the cliff notes on your experience?
So I am currently, I've just finished my bachelor's in archaeology at the University of Tromsø in northern Norway, and I'm working at the University Museum of Tromsø as well as a field archaeologist and also as a research technician right now, handling finds and cataloging artifacts. It's really fun. And I've also, most likely you might have heard from me on my TikTok account, Steffen Bakk Sigils, where I talk a lot about 3D printing, 3D archaeology, and Viking mythology, and stuff like that.
So how do you feel that 3D printing and that can help archaeology be more accessible? Because I find that a quite fascinating topic. Before we get to the ancient alien stuff, we can...
Oh, perfect. My niche. Awesome. No, I think that using 3D and especially 3D printing to make artifacts more accessible to a lot of people has great benefits for society, especially with how we teach people about artifacts. There was they've done something very interesting down at the Museum of Oslo, where they've 3D printed a lot of Stone Age axes and put them next to the display case. And that has allowed vision impaired guests to come up and actually touch the artifacts instead of just listening to them on devices. So it becomes an entirely new medium to touch and to learn about with the tactile feeling, for an example.
Really opens up a more easy way to create artifacts, because replicas can be quite expensive. Or is it really a cost saving in your perspective compared to ordering a replica to 3D printing? Do you see any cost benefits there?
So I actually had I had a whole presentation about the ethics of 3D printing, and someone actually brought that question up. Was I afraid that the trade of original artifact, like replica making, was going to be thrown out the window now that we had a more cost-efficient way to do it? But my answer was that you have to look at them as two very completely different things, because if you want to have a replica made, let's say the bronze brooch that you've probably seen me 3D print, if you want to have that cast in bronze, you definitely can, but a replicated brooch that is cast in bronze or any kind of other things like that will not be, you can't share it in the same way that, for example, a plastic replica that costs less to make. There's also the aspect of like time spent with it and the material costs. So, for example, in a museum in London, they made in the US, they made headdresses for I think it was Native Americans. And the material that it cost to make these replica headdresses was so expensive that even though their main intention and usage for them was to actually hand them out, let people try them on, they had to be displayed next to the original artifacts in the glass case and completely inaccessible. So I think that 3D printing can definitely solve the issue of both cost and availability of artifacts, which gives people a completely different understanding of what they are.
Yeah, I wouldn't really give out a real replica to a bunch of school children visiting a museum, for example.
No.
Because as you said, it's an investment, but 3D printing can really make a museum exhibition more accessible to more people who doesn't really always have their eyes, because we kind of focus a lot on objects in archaeology for obvious reasons, but
because we're little trinket hoarders. We love to touch and hold the trinkets.
Yeah, and about trinkets, I want to shift over to ancient aliens. Is this a concept you have been familiar with in the past?
It's the only thing I've really read up about it, which is I've heard a lot of horror and sci-fi podcasts, and they especially talk a lot about the Aryans, for an example, which is also alluded to in this episode of Ancient Aliens, where they have sort of would you like me to talk a little bit about it now, or take it when we get to it a little bit later?
No, we haven't really talked about the Aryans in the past. We can have it as a light introduction to the episode.
Yeah, well, it started really with it has ties back to white supremacy, of course, and also Nazi Germany and stuff, where essentially there's this higher being and higher race of aliens that's above the grays, that have white skin, super blonde hair, blue eyes, and they have names such as Freyr, Odin, Thor, and just it's been used in the most heinous way to really solidify the superiority of the white race.
Yeah, that's nothing really too unfamiliar to those listening to the show for quite some time. It's strangely right-wing and strangely Soviet propaganda coming in from ancient aliens. So, I mean, we get both camps there a little bit.
Okay, I haven't heard a lot about the Soviet angle.
Yeah, but the Soviets wasn't always as scientifically honest, and they kind of put out these very strange books on science and history, especially. There's a few examples. For example, in Mohenjo-daro. Are you familiar with that site?
No, not that I can say.
So it's in. I think it's in northern Pakistan. I might have to go back and edit this part later.
No worries.
But it is one of the earliest cities that we have, actually. And it's very nicely built. We have a city layer or street grid and everything. But there's a lot of strange claims about the site, such as it was bombed by an atomic bomb. And this Russian alternative history science book written by a Soviet, I think it's a physicist he was, and it kind of got picked up by David Childress in the 80s and 90s, and from there it kind of evolved to this. There was ancient atomic weapons in the past, and who has atomic weapons? Aliens, except it's just a mistranslation of a Russian alternative history book that's based on a mistranslation of a British study on how the body is affected by radiation during skydiving, where they bring up historical examples. And the historical example they really talk about here is an example in Egypt that gets translated to Mohenjo-daro. It's very confusing, and a lot of things have gone wrong. But that's, the butter of ancient aliens.
Yeah. It's just, if you get a ball rolling, just roll with it as far as you can. Doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter if you do leaps and bounds away from the main topic. As long as you get to a weirdly confusing sentence at the end, then you're fine.
Yeah, as long as it sounds good and sells.
Yeah.
They are great salesmen. 100%. Most of them can craft very good stories, or at least decent stories.
Yeah.
Ancient Aliens is good science fiction, as we see in Assassin's Creed, for example.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I feel like for example, when you start calling things alternative history books, I think we should go away from listening to them and taking them as science books.
Yeah, we should really come up with a new term for the whole alternative history segment as a whole. But that's a different...
Conspiracy propaganda, isn't that? Well, because you'd think when they found out that it was a mistranslation, they'd come out with a statement and say, "Oh, sorry, we were wrong."
No, they're still going with it.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, that's what I'm saying. But that's just to me, that's validity, that they know that they're just talking from talking from ignorance and not being intellectually honest about what they're actually relaying to people.
Yeah, but as I have said several times, I don't think they're in it for the honesty. They're in it for the mystery.
Yeah,
really.
the money.
Yeah,
the money mystery is, how much can I make on this?
Yeah, and then I think maybe some started that way, but I think those who are the biggest names are hardcore believers at this point. I don't think there's any, like a cult, there's no really way out of it for them.
No, it's sort of if they try to look themselves in the mirror is going to shatter, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can get behind that. That makes sense.
And if your whole life is selling mysteries and ancient aliens, you don't really have any money of coming out against it there.
No, that's fair.
So you're kind of stuck in a sense. But
yes.
About being stuck. So what did you think about the Vikings and Aliens episode?
I think the best way that I can describe it is that this episode of Ancient Aliens makes Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse look like a real documentary. Because it's just dramatic shot after dramatic shot after nonsense uttered after connections made that aren't there at all. It's insane in the most positive way. I don't understand how they could have come up with this logically and thought that this was something that they wanted to publish and say out loud. They had the entire internal monologue of one of my favorite bits is, like, for example, that Hugin and Munin are alien spy drones.
Yeah.
And they believe this, and they say it with their full chest, but they always frame it as like but could this be real? But couldn't it be that this could be the fact, actually? And we're like, no, of course not.
That's silly. Yeah, but they usually make these very large jumps to conclusions, and their whole shtick is basically that ancient people can't describe advanced technology using the words that they have access to. I mean, if you think UFO, we think two ravens.
Yeah.
Doesn't really make sense in that way. And
no, it's just, it always comes back to like the almost infantilization of ancient cultures in a way. Of like, oh no, they were like, how do I say it? Like, I don't use any offensive words, like, but they view them as they were just lesser, just because they didn't have electricity and they didn't have big cities and like in the way that we do. They were somehow less complex, which is just plain wrong in my opinion.
A term they usually use is primitive, unfortunately.
Yes.
These primitive societies that can't accomplish these things by themselves.
I was looking for that word.
I know that archaeologists in the past used that term, unfortunately, but we don't really see it in the books since at least 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of gone through it because it makes this weird connotation on how ancient people were, because they are humans, they are as intelligent as us. And at the same time, in this episode, they seem to think of the Vikings both as these primitive beasts, the warriors that we often see, but also these very advanced people with advanced metallurgy and all of that. So they can't really get an exact idea of what a Viking is or what image they want to portray of them either, to some extent.
Yes.
I mean,
yep. Sorry.
No, they start the whole episode talking about how basically Vikings invented democracy as we know it today with their...
Right.
Although their civilization was divided among numerous kingdoms, the Norse Vikings were united in their belief in the power of the individual.
They had a kind of early assembly that was very advanced for its time, before the other areas of Europe had any kind of democracy. So they actually came up with the idea that power belonged to the people, not the royalty.
They had something of a proto-democracy, and people would come from that particular region in order to argue issues of law or other kinds of cultural or issues of political significance at that time.
With their things and
the power to the people, but truly the power should always be with the people, never with the countless kings that we have in the Viking Age.
Or the jarls, political structures.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm no master on how the thing worked in at least Sweden, Viking Age. Do you have an understanding how it worked in Norway? I know that there's difference between the countries on who had voting and rights to access things.
From the way that I remember, specifically, I had a page up here, but I can't speak much for Denmark or Sweden, but in Norway at least, what we view them as is they were places where free men could go and they could voice their opinions, and they would sort of be collectively taken care of or talked about, where settlements could be made, like, Holmgang and such.
Yeah,
such and such. That's kind of the thing that we have of them. But it's weird that they're attributing this to the Vikings when we have traces of the tradition going way further back than the Vikings. Yeah, in my opinion, it just feels like a really, really weird way to misrepresent what they're talking about.
Yeah, and they kind of have, it's a very common thing, they represent Vikings as one culture. Because the thing, as you said, Norway sure will have some similarities with Sweden, but if you compare with Gotland, for example, their variation of a thing was very different. They had the big thing, and then they have, I think there's 12 districts on the island where they have separate things for what became the parishes later, basically, with different levels of attendees and who can attend what level of these things. So, I mean, there are some advanced ideas, but I mean, the Viking world isn't a single world. We're talking about a very mixed set of people sharing a similar culture.
No, yeah, especially like it's what we talked about a little bit earlier too. It's like the infantilization again of this culture, the Viking culture, and the simplification of it is just like this one tiny thing instead of considering the massive amounts of data, which they also tried to back up by saying, oh, we don't know anything about this period. There's never been any written records. Mostly only we have the 2 texts written down 300 years after the Viking Age. And it's just plain wrong. And you're sort of catering to an audience by saying that you have no data, but it's only because you haven't looked at the actual data and stuff that's there. Yeah. And I also just wanted to touch on the way that they, when you said that they don't know how to represent the Vikings, it becomes very clear after they say something along the lines of, they were a very like rich, high cultured society. And then they immediately show the attack on Lindisfarne, where they're all dressed in barbaric tunics with like fur over their coats and just slaughtering and killing for no apparent reason. So I don't even think the show knew where they wanted to go with what a Viking was.
No, and they are very split about what the Viking world is, because they kind of start getting it right. Oh, it's a large portion stretching from Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, all the way to America. They leave out the whole Baltic area, Poland, down the Volga rivers and all that. It's also part of this Viking world. But they kind of start good, and then they just went sideways. And as you touched on that, we don't have written records.
Yep.
And then they call the writing system hieroglyphs.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It's like, what do you mean hieroglyphs? There's my partner, I bless them. They sat next to me while I was watching this, and they had to like actually touch my hand and be like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, "I am." Vibrating out of my seat. This is so infuriating to watch.
I mean, there are some researcher who messed up, but I mean, it's runes, and
you can maybe get away if you were talking about the petroglyphs, but they were never mentioned at all, except they do have the one photo of the long ship.
Yeah, and there are some Bronze Age petroglyphs, but I mean, from a different era. It's the Bronze Age. It's way before the Viking Age.
Yeah.
In this case, I think those were from Tanum down in Skåne, if I remember correctly. I never brought up which ones they used, but it looked like Swedish at least.
Yeah. Because I thought it looked a little bit like the one that's up in Alta. That's what I was thinking about. In Finnmark. The UNESCO World Heritage Site. They have one that I thought was very similar. But
at the same time, most of those look kind of the same to some extent. I might be wrong too. It's just the association I thought.
Yeah, no, but I see which one I'm thinking about. And it's this... Because this one, I can agree with you that the other one looked way more Swedish. This one has it has way more people on it and has a bigger keel.
Yeah,
on the one in Alta. So I was mistaken. I'll take it back.
It's fine. We can edit that out, or I just make a little sound bite. I'm mistaken.
No, leave it in, please. People are also here not only for the yap, but to prove other people wrong. So it's fine.
Yeah. But I mean, the petroglyphs aren't really hieroglyphs. It's not really a language spoken there. I mean, proto-runic script maybe could be hieroglyphs, but at the same time they use actual runic alphabet, even if it's just...
I mean, they've just misspoken. They've just labeled it wrong. They used the wrong... I was about to use the wrong words myself, but like they just used the wrong terminology to describe the thing. And then instead of going back and maybe fixing it in post-ed, they just went with it and left it in because I don't think they understand the difference between runes and hieroglyphs.
Yeah. I mean, most Americans, I don't think, caught it, but or
probably not.
In general, people watch it. But I mean, it's a bit interesting that they bring up Greece and Rome as civilization we know a lot about, but not the Vikings, especially since we have writings about the Vikings from the Byzantium. That's basically Rome later, and we have the Venice Lion that's from Greece with the runestone carved on it. If you haven't seen it,
no, I've seen it.
So I mean,
it's like they're trying to sort of mystify the Vikings as they're trying to clear up what they were, and I don't know if that is in an attempt to try and sort of justify their bounds and leaps into, oh yeah, no, the Vikings could definitely been helped by aliens, or if they just don't know. That's always what it's for me. Like, do they we touched about it a little bit earlier. Like, do they genuinely believe what they're saying here?
I think they believe what they're saying, but it might also be a technique to kind of muddy the water. So if we have a lot of mystery that we can play on, then who really knows the truth? Is it the so-called experts, or is it, the alien theorists, or what we should call them?
Yeah, because those two are exactly the same. It's the same kind of information and the same kind of background, and we're both just here for the answers.
Yeah.
So I can see that approach as well, but it's very hard for me to believe that. For me, it's very hard to sort of align my views with that kind of narrative thinking. A little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, part of archaeology is the mystery, I say, but we kind of use it to tell a story based on the best evidence. We don't try to really hide the evidence. I think there's the main distinction between ancient aliens and historians and archaeologists.
Yeah, because what we do, look, at least how I've perceived it, is that we work, especially from the material record, from what is known into the unknown. But what we sort of see with at least pseudoscience and people maybe in like ancient aliens environments, they work from the unknown into like the known. They sort of like, they go, oh well, if Hugin and Moomin were birds that sat on Odin's shoulders and flew out into the world every day, doesn't that sound like spycopters? Couldn't that possibly be alien spycopters? So it's like they are using some sort of like some critical, like some thinking, but I don't know if they're doing like critical thinking with the information they have.
I don't think they do. And sometimes they kind of use real sites too to defend their position, as we saw with the Norse settlement in Newfoundland up in now I lost the name of the site.
It was the
Leon's Meadow.
Leon's Ox Meadows. Yeah, okay, you got it too. Yep.
Not sure about that pronunciation, but they bring up that it was found in the 1970s and all that. And it's true that it was a speculation, but the thing is, we actually found it. And we found the archaeological record in the area that they were there. It's not like the Kensington runestone, for example, where they just found a stone and nothing else ever since.
Nope. In 3 different, stages of runology as well. Wasn't it different time periods? The runes from different time periods on the same stone?
No, it's from the same, but the specific script is traced to a location in Sweden that's after, let me get this correct, 1880.
Okay.
It can't have been earlier than that due to the runes used on the stone. And as so happens, the guy who found it was from that particular region in Sweden.
Mysterious.
Mysterious.
Whoa, mysterious.
Very much indeed. Several surveys later, they haven't found a trace of Viking encampment in Minnesota, basically.
But don't get me started on Minnesota. I have so much to say about it. We even actually had a class up here that is called like archaeology, history, appreciation, and appropriation, and that Minnesota came up as one of the main contenders for the appropriating angle. There's a lot of good stuff that happens in Minnesota too. I do enjoy a lot of the work that they've done. Like, for example, when they made the Viking ship, that was very nice. But then when you actually look about what they're publishing and saying about this Viking ship, is that it's a 100% authentic Viking ship.
Yeah.
And they've combined like a replica. I think it was a replica of the Gokstad ship, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds vaguely familiar. But
and then they added like a dragon's head to it. So, you know, it had a different kind of keel on it, and it had a different shape. It was way wider than the original ship as well. So like they've taken liberties with it. But the main reason why Minnesota came up as like appropriation was because one of the biggest assaults on Native American rights and peoples in the U.S. was in Minnesota and the area surrounding Minnesota. And that's almost never really talked about in the Minnesota counties and in the cities.
Yeah, and that's a bit the dangers of using, for example, the Kensington runestone as an artifact to kind of put themselves as a indigenous people to the land, that they have the right to this due to earlier presence of Scandinavians.
Kind of erasing their own heritage and replacing it with something more ideal.
They're creating their own heritage. Not that it seems to have been the creator's idea of the stone. He, from stories, seemed to be more, I want to thumb my nose at those pesky kind of things. At least what one of the hoaxers' children said about their father, that, he wanted to, you know, snub those fancy academics and all of that, but that part is not really discussed. I actually did an episode on the Kensington runestone recently, so it's kind of familiar still.
It's the eternal struggle of farmers versus archaeologists.
Yeah,
it's,
yeah, a Norwegian, a Swede, and another Swede.
Yep.
So
Yep, no, that's fair. Jesus. But whilst we're on it, did you remember the pictures and videos they showed of the travels of the Vikings in Ancient Aliens when they talked about going to Newfoundland?
They talking about they going across the Atlantic instead of through Iceland and Greenland for some reason.
The Norse crisscrossed half the world in their longships. In the east, they sailed down the rivers of Russia to the Black and the Caspian Sea. In the west, they sailed down the coast of Europe through the Strait of Gibraltar into the Mediterranean. They reached out across the then unknown Atlantic Ocean. They went almost everywhere there was to.
And the arrow just goes.
Welcome, adventurers, to a unique podcast journey where the lines between the mystical and historical blur. Join us in the podcast and my travel where fantasy meets reality in the most unexpected of ways. Imagine a world where archaeologists aren't just digging through the earth, but through the layers of magic and mystery. Meet Ash and Tilly, your fearless guides, armed with nothing but their trusty travels and a wealth of archaeological knowledge, theory, and experience. They are on a quest to explore uncharted territories where the wonders of the past intertwine with the fantastical. Each new episode takes you through thrilling new worlds, bringing with magic, mayhem, and mind-boggling discoveries. Have you ever wondered what to do if you find vampire teeth in a Bronze Age burial? Or ponder the possibility of sampling ectoplasm? And what about studying the remains of dragons? How would one even begin to approach such a task? Ash and Tilly don't just navigate these questions alone. They are joined by a cadre of specialist guests, adding depth and insight into every mystical discovery. Together, they are not just uncovering artifacts, they are unraveling the mysteries of a realm where archaeology and mythology collide. So if you're curious to find out if fantasy really is so far from reality, and if you're eager to delve into the untold stories where the past meets the paranormal, and my travel is your ticket to an extraordinary adventure. Subscribe now. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at the archaeologicalpodcastnetwork.com. Unearth the secrets of the past and explore the realms where fantasy and archaeology intertwine. Join and my travel as they pave the way through the unknown, one episode at a time.
The worst part is they have it on the map and they go straight past it and they don't even mention it.
No.
Nope.
And then they ask, but how could these primitive people sail across the Atlantic? Something we... they didn't.
No, you missed it completely, actually. Oh,
But yeah, that's kind of how they do it. There's another episode where they talk a little bit about Vikings and the Trelleborgs down in Denmark that they claimed all on a line.
Yeah.
And they kind of draw this nice line on the map, everyone is connected. But if you zoom in or try to use a Google map, you quickly come to realize that no, that's not the case. The Trelleborgs is, of course, UFO landing spots.
No, of course. Yeah, because they are circles.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is
perfect
the only
circles.
thing. Yeah.
And people can't do perfect circles without
No, of course not.
advanced technology. It's not that you just need a string and a stick in the middle. And
yep. Not even that. All you need is like a rope and a person holding it in the middle. And then, the length of the rope, hold it taut and just walk in a circle. Yeah. That's all you need. Oh, I used to love, I can't remember the name of the guy who did it, but someone who was using experimental archaeology to test a lot of the theories on how the pyramids were built. Thank you. Yeah. The person who showed how to move the stones, for example, with easy levers and how to make the bottom of the pyramid very level, for example, by flooding the basement with water and then etching onto the line where the water level was, for an example. And it's like, it's not, of course, it's not a laser what is it called? Vadder? What is it called? Like the measuring thing, the level? A laser leveler. I don't know if that's the way to say it. So it's not science fiction in that way, but it's not primitive. It's a very ingenious way to use the materials and resources around you to do what you would like to do. It's human ingenuity at its best.
Yeah, the water level thingy is called actually a spirit level.
Oh.
But as for the pyramids and using water, I actually did an episode on the pyramids, and it seems to have been debunked that they could use water. It would evaporate too quickly when they did test in the desert. Unfortunately,
don't leave this in. Don't leave this in.
But but it was an accepted idea, and they also think that in some cases they could actually use water depending on the location of the pyramids. But the Giza Plateau, for example, it was not possible on due to the too little water too high up. And
I understand the concept of the debunking. Damn, fair enough. No, but but still, the point stands. Stands. Yeah,
we but that's something we kind of usually forgot is how to do stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, we don't have to make iron ore today, and that's a common thing that how did the Vikings get so good at getting ores? Well, they had to.
Yeah.
And not all of them were especially great. That's something they leave out from the settlement in America. The iron slag that we find in this location is horrendous. They did not manage to purify the iron properly compared to proper smith. So not everybody had the knowledge, and but they
do brush over it to just get the main facts of the story to move along as quickly as possible, so you don't actually linger on any of these sort of questions.
No.
And especially I noticed that when they were talking about the boat nails and the iron ore, and they were master craftsmen who made super complex alloys to help protect the boat nails from degeneration and rust. Okay, which ones? What are you talking about? What information are you giving me other than they had alloys, which you've given me no evidence for?
No, but you shouldn't think too much about it.
No. I think that's the slogan of this entire episode. Just don't think too much about it, and you'll be fine.
But that's also why they kind of just throw so much at you at the same time, so you don't really have time to sit and relax and let the information sink in. You kind of getting hit with something new that you have to reflect on. So now we go from both rivers to that the Mayans and Egyptians didn't travel the world while the Vikings were all over the place.
Yep. Sorry, pardon.
And all of that. So, I mean, they kind of throw everything so you don't really sit and think about it. But as you said, the advanced science of metallurgy, I think it's Jason Martell who says that, and different types of alloys. And it's all out of context from other cultures they seem to be interacting with.
they had a very solid understanding of hydrodynamics. In some of the ships, we also found advanced signs of metallurgy, smelting, and different types of alloys that they were using. And this is all out of context from other cultures they seem to be interacting with.
And it's just a strange statement out of nowhere, because, I mean, did they have some iron alloys that were really good? Sure. Did they have some iron alloys that was really, really bad? Definitely.
Yeah. But I mean, the Vikings had steel. They put the bones of their enemies onto the swords that calcified the some parts of the iron that purified it and made it into steel. So that's why the Viking swords were so much better. Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Yeah, of course, that's how it worked. The blood of my enemies and ancestors and all that.
Yeah. And everybody had a sword because they are Vikings. It's not that they kind of used axes or things like that.
Or spears.
Or spears.
One of the most common ones. No, but it yeah. But do we want to move on to mythologies in the episode? Because that was a really interesting part of it. Because that's sort of what when they started talking about aliens in Norse mythology, that's when I just realized that none of this is true. That it can't be true. I almost thought you'd sent me like a parody episode a little bit, because it's when you start thinking of Valkyries, for example, as extraterrestrials and aliens that came to help the Vikings. It goes way out of proportion for me. Let's see, because I think I had a claim. No, I think they claimed something. Yes, because they say that Valkyries might have been extraterrestrials who chose warriors to bring to Valhalla, Odin's preferred home, which is a completely different talking point, which is a completely different realm or planet, which is completely false, because Valkyries are, the divine figures in Norse mythology who serve Odin and are tasked with selecting warriors to join him in Valhalla. So they've taken something that is very clearly stated in the mythology in the Eddas and then warped it and just added the word extraterrestrial on top of it.
I think it's because a huge part of the alien narrative is that they interbreeds with people to correct mistakes in human evolution. So I think the idea there is a kind of a deep cut, but the idea is that the Valkyrias come and bring up the most noble people that then get to breed with the aliens and create, a special race of humans kind of thing there.
And what color skin would these people have?
Most definitely white.
Yeah, there we go. Jesus. Because that's what it always boils down to with like alien theories, and especially when you're talking about the Aryans, it's always like the whitest and purest of people who got to go, which is just plain racism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they doesn't even try to hide it really. If you look at Von Daniken's ideas, I don't think he was much in this episode, but I think you're familiar with him. He's the Chariot of the Gods, German, Swiss guy. And he was a huge proponent of anti-evolution stance. Okay. And especially about how the human race evolved. We have the African people who you kind of see as primitive, and then the aliens come and say, oh, this doesn't really do, and they kind of create the Asians, and then they create the Aryans. Much better. And, he doesn't really put value in it in the text, but, I mean, he kind of alludes that, we start with something, and then we evolve to something much better.
Right. Does he have any opinions on the dwarves or Sons of Ivaldi that was a little bit later on in the episode, perhaps?
Oh, that's kind of... But David Childress is also problematic. He's one of those who tend to quote both neo-Nazis and Soviet propagandist if it serves his ideas. But David Childress, he claims that the dwarves are just the gray aliens that the Vikings misinterpret.
Yes, I forgot.
And these little people are the ones who are making these high-tech weapons for the Norse gods. It would seem that these weapons are extraterrestrial in nature.
Why?
Now, when you think of dwarf and think of extraterrestrial, you think little grays. And I think the dwarves might have been alien grays. That's George Norrie who says that.
Yep.
And because they didn't know how to describe them, they will call them dwarves or little people. And these little people are the ones who are making these high-tech weapons for these Norse gods. And it would seem that these weapons are extraterrestrial in nature.
Now, when you think of dwarfs and think of extraterrestrials, you think of little grays, and I think the dwarfs might have been alien grays.
From Coast to Coast AM. And I mean, it's just a problematic statement, because if you read the Norse idea of the dwarves, it's not really aliens. They're not gray. They're
when you talked about the Greys being the people that will build this technology for the Vikings.
Mhm.
Freyr's ship. Can we just talk about Freyr's ship for a little bit? Because in the mythology, it is a ship that is built for Freyr that can be folded back and then put into your pouch. It can be put down into your thing. They got that right in the show.
Yeah.
And then they just leap with it to say that it's, what was it? An interdimensional spacecraft?
Yeah, that's not uncommon, because, I mean, there are mythologies where it is folding a boat or even a donkey together and putting in your pocket is common ideas. But since you can fold it, then it means that you can fold time, interdimensional travel, spaceship. It's not that just people kind of find it practical to put something in your pocket that's usually really big and that you want to just, I mean, a ship costs money. It's kind of tricky to get over land when you have to.
Yeah, and actually putting it up to the docks, also just figuring out where to put it and it not getting stolen or being drifted away or it being taken by the low tides and the high tides, for example. So of course. I
mean, if I could fold my car instead of finding parking in the street, I would get one of those. You know?
Yeah, no, I get. I mean, they do now have like the foldable bikes. If you want one of those instead, yep.
Not really pocket-sized yet, but
but we're getting there. It could be a backpack.
But it's these very strange leap, and again, it's the idea that ancient people can't have imagination. Everything has to be a literal interpretation of something they have seen. It's not, that they can make up stories to each other and just make things up as today.
Yeah, because I always feel like, for example, the supernatural explained in all mythologies, I feel usually just is a way for them to explain their surroundings. And usually in ways that, from a world that was more filled with more magic and filled with more of the supernatural deity, religious mythology and stuff like that. For example, the Rainbow Bridge, the Bifrost.
Yeah,
from Norse mythology, which they also mentioned in the show, which I always just thought was a rainbow. They saw a rainbow and must have thought, oh, that could be the gods traveling from the earth to from Midgard all the way up to Valhalla to Oscar.
Yeah,
or the Aurora Borealis, for example, right, with the light flickering over the sky, dancing as if and just appearing and then disappearing, right, without knowing that it's magnetic pulses from the sun. How do you explain that happening?
Yeah, and again, it's not that they were stupid. They don't have this access to the information that we have today. And we are humans as a species are curious and need to explain the things around us in the ways that we can. And of course, if we don't have a natural explanation for it, then we go to supernatural explanations that make sense instead. It's not about intelligence, it's what's accessible to you in that way and making sense of your day-to-day life. I mean, most people look at a computer as something magical today because they don't really know how it works, but they could easily look it up. But you look at it and phone magic, no idea how that works.
No. I always think about, I don't know if you do, but have you ever thought about like, what would I do if I got stuck back in time? I'd be like, I'd bring so much innovation. I would spur times ahead. And then I go like, how does a phone work? And like, how could I make a stove? I've no idea how to bring society back to to today's standard. It wouldn't change a single thing.
No,
because we take it for granted.
Yeah, I'm out hiking and that type of stuff. So I mean, I could maybe keep up with them, but be hindered when I lost, my modern knives and have to make my own new one because I have no idea how to get malm for making iron or anything like that they just did and made themselves to a large extent. But could maybe talk about wash your hands with soap.
Yeah,
so
I
we
could
don't
make
get
soap.
sick.
Yeah. That could be work, or I could just like wash our hands, wash ourselves a little bit more regularly. Disinfect wounds, for an example. Don't eat meat that smells sweet.
Yeah.
Having some sort of outside information, we could maybe fare a little bit better. But it's a coworker of me said we were discussing. We were actually discussing like intelligent back in ancient civilizations, and it's not that humanity mentally, like the capacity of our brain thought has evolved that much in the last like 1,000 years. If you took a Stone Age child and just took it, plopped it out of time stream and plopped it right back here in us, and it got adopted by a family here and they were raised, they wouldn't be that much different, if any different at all, from any child that grew up today.
Definitely not. And and if we went back to time, we most likely would only be able to influence a very limited area also. And I don't think we would be prophets either.
No, I think I would get shot on the spot, actually.
And also the language situation would be a nightmare. Old Swedish is kind of hassle to understand.
I speak Stavangersk, which is it's all the way down the south in Modla, Hafrsfjord. So I've got the R. I can use that and just kind of point to things and maybe try and articulate what I want. But that was really fun though, because I had a person from, I think he was from Wales, and he told us about like old English words, and when he spoke them, they just sounded exactly like they do now in Norwegian, or not exactly, but like they have the same kind of word build up and the sound and sounding of the words.
Yeah, but there's a lot of influence of both Danish and Norwegian in the English language for some weird reason. It's not that they went and pillaged and took over the island for...
No. Just for kicks. But they do actually mention that in the show as well, when they go, we actually get our word for thunder from the god Thor. And it's like, well, yes, but it's Thor and Torden.
But they do mention that in Old Swedish, Thor is associated with thunder, which is kind of correct. We kind of said that the Thor rullar, or Thor is rolling over the sky.
We have that too, like his chariot with the goats, and we also say that it's he's striking the anvil with his hammer, and that's what's making like the thunder.
Yeah, we have that too. So there's ideas of it that they get correct. And something I want to bring up too is that they talk about how the Christianization a little bit of especially Sweden. They talk about Gamla Uppsala, old Uppsala.
When they get to the big temple.
Gamla Uppsala, Sweden. This small town, 40 miles north of Stockholm, is one of the oldest continuously inhabited sites in Scandinavia. Beneath this church, archaeologists have found what they believe are the remains of a famous temple called Uppsala.
Yeah, the home of the big temple. And beneath the church there, they claim that they found this old temple. And no, they haven't. They actually found the remains of 2 older churches beneath it in excavations. But there's no old temple found in Uppsala as of yet, at least.
Yeah.
There's actually very few cases where churches have been built over cult places. The only one I know for sure is on Frösö up in Jämtland in Sweden. And under the floor in the Frösö church, they actually found a birch stump, and that's been burnt, and animal remains that seems to have been sacrificed at one point or another. I think that's one of the few cases where they actually have a cult place that's been used as where the church has been built on top of the actual place. Usually they're just built in the vicinity of the old place. So kind of just move people from the old to the new.
Yeah, I mean, we have that sort of tradition here in Norway as well. I don't know if you've kept up with the excavation in Stavanger under the Domkirke.
No, I haven't really on that. Did they find any cult place?
So it's not necessarily a cult place, but they've definitely found traces of old Viking burials underneath the church, like directly underneath it, which is a structure that's the church itself they started building around the 12th and 13th century. But these bones, like quite a lot of them, seem to be dating to Viking area and a little bit before. So yeah.
I could see that as a way to kind of replace the old cult, or not necessarily that they built on top of the old temple, but where people went for cult offerings, in a sense.
Yeah, I can see, because I don't think they've found a lot of. There's not been a lot of structure. It's just been the I think it's 4 or 5 graves, if I'm not mistaken, with quite fully intact skeletons as well. But not a lot of grave goods, and I think the main theory is that it's believed to be like in the transition from the Viking Age and over to more Christian era and Christian mannerisms.
But there's are pagan graves, or are they in between?
I can double check that, because the news article didn't really specify a lot about it, because I do also think it's an ongoing excavation, so they don't think they've come out with the report yet.
Yeah.
So I'll be a little bit careful about stating things as fact before they come out with it. But I do think they don't mention anything specific about if these are specific pagan graves.
Yeah, it could be interesting. Anyway, if it's an early Christian graves, it's interesting to see the Christianization from it. We have a couple of churches in Sweden that's on the brink between the Viking Age and the Christian era, where we have these really, really early Christian graves in churches around that era too. One of the oldest stone churches is in Varnhem in Sweden, and it has burials. It's the church of a very influential family in the area, so it's their family church basically. But in there we have found the graves from those living at the farm, and they had even tombstones carved with runes, which we also find in, for example, on Gotland. We have several churches that has actually tombstones with runes in the Gotlandic churches.
Yeah, and what time period will these be dated to? Like when does it kind of stop and ebb off?
1300, 1400, the cutoff there.
Yeah, okay.
I think 1425 is the latest in Gotland. Yeah. But that's not really a Viking grave, but they use the runic alphabet still on Gotland. They do that very long into history, just as Jämtland used runes basically up till 1904. We have the last inscription known and all of that. So, I mean...
Wow. Yeah. Sorry, I just got a little bit put out because I'm trying to figure out a little bit about if it could have been pagan graves in the Domkirke in Stavanger. It's only because it's positioned right next to the port, so it would have been a big area where people would have seen immediately. So it could definitely be a place where people would collect in the town and gather. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that we would want to reappropriate it, and if they associate some early graves with the church, I mean, it benefits the church, I guess, anyway.
Yeah.
Where should people go if they want to hear more from you?
They can go to my TikTok handle, Steffen Bakk Sigils on TikTok. And I've been thinking about maybe creating a YouTube channel that will be under the same name, but I've not gotten around to doing that quite yet. So stay tuned if you'd like to see that.
But thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you again. Again, a huge thank you to Steffen, and if you want to check out his stuff, there will be links to all of those in the show notes. And next time, we will speak with Professor Howard Williams about Viking burial rites and if they really were influenced by extraterrestrial beings. Until then, please spread the word by leaving a positive reviews on platforms like iTunes or Spotify, or even better, recommend an episode or two to one of your friends. And you will find further reading suggestions at the website diggingupancientaliens.com. And if you want to support the show, you can do that to patreon.com/diggingupancientaliens or diggingupancientaliens.com/support if you want another option that's not Patreon. And if you sign up, you get early episodes, you get extended episode, and you get bonus content. You get a bunch of different things, and you help supporting the shows because, well, things cost money, books, hosting services, a large array of stuff that I won't bore you with. But yeah, you get ad-free episodes, you get a lot of stuff, and, well, you're helping me out, and I will be truly grateful for it. And I really hope that you also go and visit the Archaeological Podcast Network.com's website because they have a lot of amazing shows on this network. And they also have a membership if you want to support all the shows in a sense. But if you want to contact me, it can be done through most of the social media sites that I'm on. And if you have comments, corrections, suggestions, or you just want to write that comment in all caps, you can most efficiently do that by sending me an email. And my email address is at the website again. Sandra Martelor created the intro music, and our outro is by the band called Trallskruv, who sings the song Foliehatt. Links to both of these artists will be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep shoveling that science.
Men jag skyddar mig för jag